After 2 years in prison in Caesarea with no verdict, Paul went and pushed the golden buzzer. Off to Rome, quick trial, freedom by Christmas, right? Wrong. Instead, life kicked those plans in the teeth, and he spent 14 days caught in a northeaster, followed by a complete shipwreck. Well, last week, chapter 27, we learned how important it is to take some food in the middle of the messes of life while you're still waiting for things to get better. Paul did that, and then daylight came the next morning, and the ship struck a sandbar and smashed apart, and he and the others floated to some kind of land, some kind of island, but where on earth is he? And without a ship, how is he ever going to make it to Rome? This week, our final chapter, chapter 28, Final Adventure, Part 3. Land. We finally made it to land. It's raining, it's cold, it's wet, it's winter, we're soaked to the bone, freezing, shivering. We have no idea where we are, but it's land, and we were glad to land on shore. All 276 of us got safely on shore, and after 2 weeks, the nightmare at sea with the northeaster is over. Well, I'm going to make this chapter 28 and the final chapter of our story, by the way. So this will be verse 1. Once we safely got ashore, we found out the island was called Malta. Malta. Sailors knew it, but we weren't at the right part of the island. The port was on a different part, so they hadn't recognized it initially. Well, the storm wasn't over. The rain was still coming down. Like I said, it was cold. But the islanders, the people that lived on the island, were super kind, and they actually started a fire for us. They knew how to make fires that could last through the rain. They were experts at that kind of thing. And they got a big fire started for us so we could come in and warm ourselves. And Paul was, he was a preacher of the gospel, but he was also a hard worker. He worked his whole life. He had a trade that supported himself. He was a tent maker, as you guys know. He was always working. And so he got to land. He saw there was stuff that needed to be done. There was fires. They needed to get wood. So he went, gathered up a bunch of wood, brought it over, set it down on the fire. And when he set it down on that fire, a viper that was in the wood, driven out by the heat, came out of the wood, bit Paul on the hand, and just sunk into his hand. It was hanging there. And Paul saw the snake, shook it off into the fire. But guys, all the villagers that were there, they just stood there open mouthed like, they couldn't believe it. And they said to themselves privately, they said, guys, this guy must be a murderer. They saw the chains. These guys were prisoners. They knew there was a prisoner ship, and so they said, guys, this guy must have been a terrible murderer or something really bad. And even though he escaped the storm and he made it to sea, the goddess justice has not let him alive. It's not let him survive. And they totally they were watching him, they just expected him to fall over dead at any moment or maybe swell up and then die. But 1 hour went by, 2 hours went by, Paul was fine. 3 hours went by, the next day went by, no negative effects. And after that, instead of calling him a murderer, they started thinking he was a god and calling him a god among themselves. Okay? He wasn't a god, trust me. But the leader of this island was a guy named Publius, and his estate wasn't too far from the shore. So we went to his estate, and actually for 3 days, he hosted us on his estate, which was super kind of him, and just was really kind to us, showed us a lot of hospitality. Now, Publius's father was sick in bed, suffering from a fever and dysentery, something I've seen often as a medical doctor. And so Paul went in to see him, and Paul prayed for him, put his hand on him, and then Paul healed him. Now, needless to say, word spread around this little island quickly. And what do you think they all did the next day? Yeah, everybody who was sick or had somebody in their family that was sick came to Paul. And Paul was praying for people and healing them. Well, the people on that island showed us a ton of respect, lots of different forms of honor, lots of forms of gratitude. They really just overwhelmed us by all the respect and love they showed us as strangers. So we spent the whole winter there. All of us, soldiers, prisoners, sailors, and me and Paul, we spent the whole winter there, 3 months on that island. I mean, we couldn't do anything. We couldn't sail. We're obviously not going to sail. We made a mistake once trying to sail when it was too close to winter. So we just hunkered down, stayed there for 3 months. And then when it was spring and it was the seas were safe enough to sail, off we went. They actually had a ship there on the island that had harbored there at the harbor. It was a big old Alexandrian ship, and we were able to go on it and sail to Rome. Julius got us permission, and we just went. Now, this ship was kind of cool. It had, you know what figureheads are? The front of ships, sometimes they'll have different figureheads. Well, this one had a figurehead of the twin gods, Castor and Pollux, two sons of Zeus. Well, anyway, we got on the ship, and we zipped. We had no problem, guys. We went straight from Malta to Italy with no problem at all. Smooth sailing. We landed first at Syracuse, stayed there for 3 days, and then we landed at Rhegium, or Region in Greek, and we stayed there for 1 day, and then we got the south wind that we wanted, that wind that would just carry us up north, and so we just zipped right up to Puteoli, which was our destination, guys. We made it to our destination city. This was the last stop for grain ships, and we were technically a grain ship without any grain, because kind of threw it overboard. But we made it to our destination, and guys, we were thrilled. This was our stop, so all 276 of us got off. The soldiers stayed in chains there, and the prisoners stayed in chains with the soldiers guarding us. And we were there. No more sailing. We were thrilled. Of course, now the walking starts. We've got 170 miles to walk with chains on our hands. Okay, not me, of course. I was just a guest of Paul, but yeah. But first, Julius had some business there in town, and so we had a whole week free there in Puteoli, and he let us go, and Paul, we spent some time with the Christians there, and they showed us a lot of kindness, and yeah, we stayed there for a whole week. So then it started, the 170-mile walk from Puteoli up to the capital city, Rome, where Paul could stand trial in front of Caesar. A lot of walking. Now, guys, I want to break something down to you. So there were Christians in Rome. Paul had never been there, but there were Christians because Christianity had been spreading through the empire. Paul was a big part of that. But there were Christians in Rome, and 3 years ago, when Paul was on his third missionary trip, when he was at Corinth, he wrote a letter to the Christians at Rome, and he said he really wanted to come and visit them. In fact, I've got a copy of it here. I'm going to read you what he wrote to them, all right? Now listen to this. This is what Paul had written. They had this letter. They knew who Paul was. Listen to what Paul had said. This is in the first chapter of his letter to the Romans, verse 8 to 12. First, I want to thank my God through Jesus, the chosen one, for all of you. I thank him because people everywhere in the world are talking about your great faith. The Roman Christians, it was spreading around about them. There was Christians in the capital. And every time I pray, Paul said to them, I always pray, I always remember you, and God knows this is true. He's the one I serve with all my heart by telling people the good news about his son. And I pray that I will be allowed to come to you. It will happen if God wants it. I really want to see you and give you some spiritual gift to make your faith stronger. I mean that I want us to help each other with the faith that we have. Your faith will help me, and my faith will help you. So brothers and sisters, I want you to know that I've planned on coming to you many times if something always happens to change my plans. That's what Paul had written to them 3 years earlier, that someday he wanted to come to them. Well, guys, guess what? He's coming to them. But this wasn't the way he planned to come to them. What's the situation Paul's in, guys, as he's coming to this city with Christians? Think about how embarrassing this might be. He's not coming to them as this like famous missionary. He is a famous missionary, but he's surrounded by soldiers and he's in chains. He's basically coming to them as an arrested criminal. Can you think about and imagine how embarrassing that would be to Paul? What if one of your pastors from the future was going to visit some church family, and he's planning to visit them for a conference, planning to visit them, maybe a church in a neighboring city, and he tells them, I'm coming, and then he gets arrested, and they bring him to that city for trial. Like, can you think of how embarrassing that would be for one of your pastors to show up in your city with chains on him and he's a criminal? Can you imagine what Paul was kind of feeling? This wasn't the way he had planned to get there. And would they be embarrassed by him and want to have nothing to do with him? Well, soon enough, Paul would get his answer to that question. Well, some of those Christians from Rome, they did hear, hey, the Paul guy got arrested and he was put on trial and sent here to Rome, and he's actually in Italy right now. They heard about it. News spreads through the Roman Empire, right? And they heard he's been in prison for 2 years. He's been stuck. And now he's in chains. And they've started walking. He's in Puteoli right now. And so they heard about that. And you know what they did, guys? 43 miles. 43 miles. Paul and my team started walking up to meet them. 180 miles to Rome. And they met us 43 miles outside of the city. Walking up, they had started walking down. And they walked 43 miles to meet us. They met us at a place called the Forum of Appius. 43 miles. You think Paul's expecting that? No. He was still wondering if they were going to be embarrassed about him as he's walking up to Rome. He still thought he had 2 more days to reach him. And there they were at the Forum of Appius. 43 miles. Guys, have you ever walked more than 10 miles? They walked 43 miles to show Paul beyond a shadow of a doubt. Paul, we love you. You are our brother, and we're not only not ashamed of you, we are proud to call you our brother. And you know what? We're going to walk with you into our city, 43 miles back. They walked 43 miles down, met Paul, and we're going to walk with you to show everybody in our city that we are proud to be your brother. And so these guys were going to walk back with the prisoners. You know, that'd be like walking with the police officers. That'd be like walking out of the city to meet your pastor when he's coming, and coming in with the police officers with him. Guys, Paul was a warrior, right? I mean, he was tough. Think about this. He had just gone through 2 years of prison. He had his warrior helmet on, all right? And then a 60-day hard trip at sea. And Paul was the rock everybody on that ship was looking to at some of the key times. So he was in warrior mode, right? And then 14 days of storm. And again, he was the warrior. He was the one giving everybody the encouragement. And then 3 months on the island where, again, everybody was looking to Paul. He was the rock. He always had to be the strong one, right? And guys, when somebody's a warrior, maybe there's some Christians in your life that are like warriors and you think they don't ever need encouragement. Guys, warriors need encouragement too. But they don't often receive it as easily as other people because they're tough. They got their shields up, right? Sometimes you got to really think of a creative way to get encouragement through to a warrior. And let me tell you guys, that 43 miles of walking was the way this church family at Rome decided, you know what, we're going to get some love and some encouragement through to our brother Paul. And let me tell you guys, that encouragement hit its mark, hit him right in the heart. And he saw them, when he saw them, guys, coming towards him on the road, 43 miles. Guys, he was overwhelmed. Their encouragement, their act of love hit his heart. And he fell to his knees, and he just praised God right then and there for them, for their encouragement, for their love. And so that was the moment Paul got the encouragement he needed, soaked it in, and started walking. So we walked with them, and I was there too, right? We're walking past the Forum Appius. 11 miles further, and we were 33 miles out of Rome. A second wave of Christians from Rome, a second group met us, and they turned around and started walking with us. Now we got this big old convoy of Christians with us, and we were super encouraged just walking into Rome. And that's how we did it, guys. We walked a couple of days, made it to Rome, and ever since Paul has been in Rome now, he's had 2 years. He's just been on house arrest. So it's not terrible. They give him his own place. He actually rents a house, and he has to live with a soldier. Okay, he can't go around freely. That kind of is not fun, but it's not like, he's in a dungeon somewhere. It's nice. He can have his friends come to him. Other Christians can come to him. He can meet with people. So, Paul makes it to Rome. The challenge is finally over. This big struggle and trial he's been through, 2 years of prison. Remember, 60 days at sea, 14 days in the northeast, or 3 months stranded on an island, and 5 days of walking, and he finally gets to Rome. Wouldn't you think this time for a little vacation? And if so, of course you would. Of course you would. How long of a vacation you think you would probably give yourself? Because Paul gave himself a little vacation too. I just want you to think. Just gone through 2 years of trial, 2.5 years, incredible struggle. How long of a vacation would you take? Well, Paul gave himself a vacation, and it lasted a whole 2 days. He gave himself 2 days of rest, and then on day 3, he got the itch. He was like, we got to do something for the kingdom. You see, when you get older as a Christian, some of these other things that bring you pleasure when you're a young Christian, it's like everything just kind of loses its appeal. And the only thing that really fuels your soul is doing some work for the kingdom. And that's why Jesus said that one time in his life when they were like, did somebody bring you food? And he wasn't even eating. Jesus was like, my food is doing the will of God and serving him. And sometimes, and that's not phony, and Paul was at that state in his Christian life where he just loved serving the kingdom. That was the adventure. Everything else was kind of boring and dull to him, but he loved serving the kingdom. So, he's in Rome. He can't go nowhere, but he wants to serve the kingdom. What do you think Paul did? Yep. He called the Jews of the city. There were Jews in every city of the empire, major cities, and there were definitely Jews in Rome. And he called the Jews together and said, brothers, I got something to tell you. And they got together and he said, brothers, I know you see I'm in house arrest here, right? I'm a criminal, whatnot, and I'm Jewish. But I want you to know, flat out, I have done nothing against our people, against our laws, against our customs. I was arrested in Jerusalem by the Jews there, handed over to the Romans, and the Romans wanted to let me go, but the Jews there in Jerusalem would not let them. So eventually, I pushed the golden buzzer, and I came here to Rome to stand trial. But I got nothing against our people whatsoever. In fact, I wanted to come together and tell you that, and also tell you the real reason that I'm in chains. And that's because I believe in the hope of Israel. And they replied, these Jews said, hey, Paul, we haven't got any letters from any of the Jews down there in Jerusalem, and our people that visit there that have come back, they haven't said anything bad about you. So, as a matter of fact, we want to hear what you got to say, because we know you're part of this Christian sect, and we know it's growing, spreading around. We've heard about it. We know people everywhere are saying bad things about it. We want to hear from you what it's all about. So, what is that? That, my friends, is an open door. So they picked a date, put it on a calendar, and when the day came, a big old group of Jews was there. And they all squeezed into Paul's little house, right? And I wonder if that Roman soldier was there. And it was morning time, and Paul took the whole day just explaining to them 2 things about God's kingdom. God has got a kingdom, guys. He was telling them. And number 2, that Jesus is the chosen one, proving it to them. He just spent the whole day, God's kingdom, and Jesus is the chosen one, trying to convince them from the law and the prophets. That means from these Old Testament scrolls and the prophecies that are in there that Jesus fulfilled during his life. All day, from morning to evening. Now, some of them were convinced and became Christians. Others, they refused to believe. And there started to be a disagreement then among the ones that did believe and the ones that didn't. Basically, it was the same thing Paul saw anywhere he went with Jews. Some believe, but a lot don't. And then they end up arguing and getting hostile. All right? So, Paul said one final thing to them. And guys, this is it. This is the last part of my story. These are the final verses of my account here. You see, I'm on my last page right here, right? To this big old scroll. So this is it. Listen up. This is it. The story's going to end right here. Paul said to them, he said, brothers, because you see, Paul had been all over the place talking to Jews. All right? And Paul said one final thing. He said, brothers, you know the Old Testament. And he pulled out one of the scrolls in his mind. He didn't have a copy with him. He's like, you know the scroll of Isaiah. And I've got it here with me, so I'm going to use it. He says, you know, this was 700 years ago. Okay, Isaiah was written 700 BC. I guess for you guys there in the future, it's way long. Isaiah was way longer than 700 years ago. It would be like 700 plus 2,000. It'd be like 2,700 years ago for you guys. Anyway, Paul says, hey, brothers, you remember the scroll of Isaiah. And you remember at the very beginning, when God spoke to Isaiah, he told them, and then Paul quotes from it. This is in Isaiah 6, chapter 6, verse 9 and 10, if you guys want to read it. And Paul's quoting to them from Isaiah, and he says, God went to Isaiah, right? And God told Isaiah, said, Isaiah, I want you to go to the Jewish people, and you tell them this. You tell them, you guys will always keep on hearing, but you won't understand. You'll always keep on seeing, but you won't really perceive. And Isaiah's like, you want me to tell the people that? And God's like, yes. And Isaiah, of course, what he was thinking is, if I tell them that, they're going to get mad at me. Why do I have to tell them that? And God explained before Isaiah could even object. God answered, because their hearts are crusty. They barely hear with their ears, and they've closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. That's what God told Isaiah about the Jewish people. They always are listening, but they never understand. Their hearts are crusty. They barely hear with their ears. They're like people with their fingers in their ears. They can hear a little bit, but not much. And they miss a lot. And Paul says, that was 700 years ago. God said that to our ancestors. And guys, I'm just going to put it to you directly. Paul says to these Jews, it's true. It was true about our people then, and it's true about our people now. You see, guys, the Jewish people kind of had this mindset that because we're God's chosen people, we can't ever miss something he's trying to get across to us. We always will get it. God's kind of stuck with us. He can't go on and work with other people. He's committed to us, and we're like the chosen ones, so we can't ever get it wrong. And Paul's like, no. Just because you're Jewish, you don't get an immunity to totally missing the boat. Just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you might totally miss what God's trying to say to you. It's happened over and over in our history. And so you better be warned, and you better be careful. And don't think just because you're Jewish, you can't miss what God's trying to say in an important way. And Paul looked at him finally and said one final thing. He said, listen to me, Jewish people, my brothers, listen to me very clearly. I want you to understand what I'm about to say. This was the last thing he said. He said, I've been all over this empire. And let me tell you this. I can tell you this without any doubt. God is taking his salvation to the Gentile people, all these non-Jews. And they are listening, guys. They're listening. When they heard him say that, a bunch of them started to get up and started to leave. It was just like it was everywhere else for Paul. Well, that's the end, guys. Paul's been there in that same little house for these last 2 years. He welcomes everybody that comes to him, and he's always talking about the same two things. Let me keep writing this down here. He's always talking to people. I'm going to make this verse 31, the last verse in my account. He's always talking to people about two things, about God's kingdom and about Jesus, who is the chosen one. Well, guys, that takes things right up to today. This is it, right here. My account is finished. 30 years of history in about 30 pages. One roll, 30 pages, 30 chapters or so. This went from Jesus' resurrection, chapter 1, about 33 AD, right up to today, 62 AD. 33 AD to 62 AD. So basically 30 years. I guess technically 29 years, but who's counting? So who's got a really good memory? Who remembers in chapter 1 when this first started? 33 AD, Jesus leaves his disciples, ascends up into heaven. How many Christians were there in the whole world at that point? Chapter 1. Chapter 1 of my account. Yes, good job. There was only 120 Christians in the whole world. And what ethnicity were they? 100%. They were one ethnicity. Yep, Jewish. They were 100% Jewish. And they were all in one city. What city? Jerusalem. That's all there was. 120 Jewish Christians in one city. And today, guys, 30 years later, as I stand before you, 62 AD, guys, there's Christians. Christianity is now a global movement on 3 different continents, a whole lot of different cultural groups. Asia, Africa, and most recently, here in Europe. God is doing and has done amazing things. But we didn't reach and disciple all the groups. This is the story of how Christianity went global. But we didn't finish the work, right? We discipled and reached a lot of people with the gospel, but not all of them. Now, guys, it's your turn. And I want to urge you, throw yourself into that mission with everything you've got. I don't care if your parents are doing it. I don't care if your brother is doing it. I don't care if your sister is doing it. You throw yourself into the mission with everything you got, sharing your faith with people as you're able and as God has gifted you and wired you with your personality, and then discipling people as God provides you opportunities to. Throw yourself into that with all you've got. Guys, it's been such a privilege sharing our story with you. This has been the 28th and final chapter of our story. Wait, Dr. Luke, hold on, buddy, pal, come on. I mean, you're not going to run off that suddenly, are you, on us? I mean, right, guys? Help me out. There's got to be something else you can tell us about Paul and what he's been doing the last couple years there in Rome, isn't there? Well, I mean, yeah, mostly that's what he's been doing. He's written a few letters. He's been writing a few letters to some of the Christians in the churches from the different cities where he discipled people on a missionary trip. Yes, letters. That's right. He's going to write a letter to the Christians from Ephesus. Help me out, guys. People who live in America are called what? Americans. People who live in Canada are called what? Canadians. And people who live in Ephesus, if you're going to write a letter to people from Ephesus, you call a letter to the Ephesians. Are we right? Yep, you're right. That was one of the letters that he's written to them, because remember, he did spend 2 years with them, but he only visited them once. So yeah, he definitely wanted to write a letter to them. And Dr. Luke, he's also, if we're not mistaken, he's going to write a letter, or maybe he already is working on it, to the Christians in Philippi, who are called what, guys? Philippians. And he's also going to write a letter to the Christians in the city Colossae, who are called Colossians. Yes. Are we right there? Yeah, I'm impressed. You really know your geography. No. Dr. Luke, you don't understand. This is way more than geography. These letters become famous. They become part of the canon. I mean, for us, this isn't our geography. This is our history, and it's tied in with our present. These are huge. Very interesting. Don't you get it? Dr. Luke, we're from the future. There's so much we could tell you about. It's the year 62 AD for you, right? That's right. Yep, but I really do have to get going now. Wait, where do you have to run off to right now? I don't get it. Well, the same place I go every week after I'm done writing my chapter down and sharing it with you guys. I go to visit Paul and bring him his supper. You know he's on house arrest, right? And that means you don't leave the house. People don't bring you food, You get pretty hungry. That's right. House arrest, 62 AD. He's going to be on house arrest for a while. 2 years and counting, believe me, I know. But don't you want any spoilers? Don't you want to know anything that's happening next? I mean, we could warn you about things. The trial, the emperor, what happens with Paul. I mean, I appreciate anything. That. Don't you want to hear something? I really do appreciate it, but no. I believe, the adventure really is part of the journey. And no matter what's coming on the path ahead, I know we're going to have everything that we need to make it through strong. So I appreciate that, but no. Okay, I respect that. But could you at least come back one more week and just give us a chance to kind of debrief and wrap things up with you? If you wish, I'll try. Okay, thank you, Dr. Luke. Thank you. We will be sure we're here and we don't miss it next week. Please don't forget about us next week, all right? All right. Thanks, Dr. Luke. Good night.